So that was the definition that was given by the Watchtower. And we might add that Jehovah is usually involved in designing the type.
David Splane breaks the bad news. Why 25,000 left. Jehovah's Witnesses have shocked many people around the world. This topic raises serious questions about what really happened and why so many people decided to leave. Was it disagreement, change in belief, or something deeper inside the organization? The news has created confusion, emotion, and strong reactions everywhere. Why did this happen? What caused such a big number? And is there more to the story than people know? Join us as we look closely into this situation and what it could mean for the future. David Splane's early growing responsibilities. In 1954, only a short time after his father was baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, young David was given an opportunity that would become an important part of his early life. At just 9 years old, he was asked to deliver his very first public talk. The subject assigned to him was Armageddon. It was not something he had carefully planned or expected. According to his own account, he simply requested that his name be called during a congregation program. At the time, he did not realize that doing so meant standing before an audience and giving a public presentation. Although unexpected, that experience became the beginning of his involvement in public speaking. Speaking before a group at such a young age introduced him to a role that would continue throughout the years that followed. What started as a simple misunderstanding became his first experience in public teaching. During his teenage years, David developed another strong interest outside of public speaking. He studied music and took piano lessons, showing ability and dedication as he learned the instrument. His interest in music suggested that he had the talent to continue developing those skills. It represented a path that could have led him in a completely different direction. However, his life eventually followed another course as he chose to devote himself to his religious activities rather than pursue music as his primary focus. In 1963, David became a full-time pioneer. By taking on this role, he dedicated his time and efforts to preaching on a full-time basis. This marked another important stage in his life, reflecting a greater commitment to the work he had chosen to do. Only a few years later, he attended the Watchtower Bible School of Gilead. This school provided training for missionaries before they received assignments to serve in different parts of the world. After completing his training, David received an assignment that took him far from his home. He was sent to Senegal in West Africa, where he would begin missionary work in a completely different environment. Moving to Senegal required major adjustments. The conditions were very different from those he had previously known. Daily life was not easy, and missionary service demanded both time and effort. The work involved long hours, unfamiliar languages, different customs, and a culture that required constant learning and adaptation. Living and working in such surroundings meant adjusting to new routines while continuing his assigned responsibilities. Despite these challenges, people who knew David during that period described him as dependable and deeply committed to his work. Those who supported his efforts viewed these years as an example of his willingness to place his religious responsibilities ahead of personal comfort. They regarded his missionary service as evidence of his dedication to the work he had accepted. After his missionary assignment came to an end, David returned to Canada. Following several years of serving overseas, some may have expected that he would take on a quieter or less demanding role after coming home. Instead, his responsibilities continued to increase. Rather than slowing down, he entered another lengthy period of active service. Over the next 19 years, he spent much of his time traveling throughout Canada. His work involved visiting congregation after congregation on a regular basis. This schedule required him to spend long periods away from home while moving from one location to another in order to fulfill his assignments. Traveling so extensively demanded consistency and endurance. Each congregation visit brought new meetings, new audiences, and new opportunities to carry out his responsibilities. The work required careful preparation, as well as the ability to communicate clearly with many different groups of people over an extended period. Throughout those 19 years, David gained experience by working closely with congregations across the country. His repeated visits allowed him to observe how congregations functioned in different locations, while continuing to teach and support their activities. The steady routine of traveling, meeting people, and carrying out assignments became a significant part of his daily life. Although these responsibilities kept him busy, his name remained largely unknown outside the organization during that period. His work was not widely recognized by the general public. Instead, it was carried out quietly through regular visits, meetings, and continued service within the congregations he was assigned to visit. Those many years of traveling from one congregation to another provided him with experience that extended beyond public speaking alone. The work also gave him a closer understanding of how the organization operated at the local level. Each congregation visit, each meeting, and each conversation added to the experience he accumulated over time. As the years passed, these experiences contributed to the reputation he developed among those who worked with him. He became known for discipline in carrying out his responsibilities, loyalty to the organization, and careful attention to his teaching. These qualities gradually became associated with his work and the way he fulfilled his assignments. Over time, those characteristics did not go unnoticed. The years he spent serving in different roles, first as a young speaker, then as a full-time pioneer, later as a missionary in Senegal, and finally as a traveling representative throughout Canada, formed a continuous period of preparation marked by increasing responsibility. Each stage built upon the one before it, leading to greater experience through years of consistent service and regular involvement with congregations across the country. Teaching that drew worldwide attention. In the year 1990, David Splane and his wife, Linda, received a new assignment. They moved to the organization's headquarters in the United States, known as Bethel. This was a major turning point in his life and service. Instead of traveling from one congregation to another, he began serving in a different way. His work shifted from public assignments to responsibilities carried out behind the scenes. At Bethel, David Splane first worked in the service department. Later, he was assigned to the writing department. This department was responsible for preparing publications that were read by millions of Jehovah's Witnesses around the world. Although most people never saw the work taking place, it played an important part in the organization. The publications helped explain Bible teachings and provided guidance for Jehovah's Witnesses in many countries. Through this assignment, David Splane became closely involved in the preparation and communication of the organization's teachings. Much of this work remained out of public view. It was not the type of assignment that attracted public attention. However, it placed him in a position where he was directly involved in the development of material used throughout the worldwide organization. His responsibilities continued to grow over the years as he gained more experience. By the year 1998, David Splane had been appointed as a helper to the writing committee. This was another important step in his service. As a helper, he worked closely with the committee that oversaw the preparation of the organization's publications. His role became even more significant as he supported the work of those responsible for producing written material used by Jehovah's Witnesses around the world. Just 1 year later, another important event took place. During the Watchtower Society's annual meeting on October 2nd, 1999, an unexpected announcement was made. 4 new members were appointed to the governing body. David Splane was one of those chosen. For many Jehovah's Witnesses, this appointment reflected many years of faithful service and dedication. His long history of assignments within the organization had prepared him for this new responsibility. While many members of the religion recognized the importance of the announcement, people outside the organization knew very little about him at the time. His name was not widely known beyond the community of Jehovah's Witnesses. That situation would soon begin to change. As a member of the governing body, David Splane's responsibilities became much greater. He was no longer serving only in the preparation and explanation of existing teachings. He had become part of the small group responsible for interpreting Scripture. directing worldwide organizational policies and helping shape the beliefs and teachings followed by millions of Jehovah's Witnesses around the world. This new position greatly expanded his influence within the organization. Decisions made by the governing body affected Jehovah's Witnesses in many different countries and cultures. As one of its members, David Splane shared in those responsibilities. With that greater influence also came greater responsibility, especially when explaining important Bible teachings to members around the world. Before long, one particular doctrinal explanation would place David Splane at the center of one of the most widely discussed teachings in the modern history of Jehovah's Witnesses. For many years after joining the governing body, David Splane continued working mostly behind the scenes. Although he held an important leadership position, he was not regularly seen by most Jehovah's Witnesses. That changed when the organization introduced JW Broadcasting. The launch of JW Broadcasting brought members of the governing body directly into the homes of millions of Jehovah's Witnesses around the world. Through these broadcasts, viewers could watch Bible discussions, organizational updates, and explanations of important teachings presented by members of the governing body themselves. David Splane quickly became one of the most familiar faces on the broadcasts. His calm style of speaking, careful explanations, and detailed illustrations made him especially well known among viewers. He often presented subjects that required thoughtful and step-by-step explanations. His approach focused on breaking complex teachings into smaller parts so that listeners could follow the reasoning more easily. Because of this ability, he was frequently chosen to explain some of the organization's most detailed and challenging teachings. Over time, his presentations became closely associated with careful doctrinal explanations. Then came one of the most significant teachings he would explain. For many decades, Jehovah's Witnesses had taught that the generation connected with the events of 1914 would not pass away before God's kingdom brought an end to the present system of things. As the years continued to pass, however, many of those who had lived during 1914 were becoming very old. This led to increasing questions from both inside and outside the religion regarding the understanding of that teaching. In the year 2010, the organization introduced a revised explanation known as the overlapping generation. During an official broadcast, David Splane presented this updated explanation by using timelines and illustrations. He explained that the prophecy referred to two groups of anointed Christians whose lifetimes overlapped, rather than referring to only one single generation. Among supporters of the organization, this explanation was viewed as an example of what Jehovah's Witnesses describe as new light. According to this understanding, a clearer explanation of Scripture becomes available over time as understanding increases. Others viewed the change differently. Critics argued that the revised explanation was an attempt to answer long-standing questions about earlier prophetic expectations. As a result, the discussion surrounding the teaching continued. The debate did not end after the explanation was presented. Instead, the teaching became one of the most widely discussed doctrines connected with David Splane. Because he was the person chosen to explain it publicly, many observers closely associated his name with the overlapping generation teaching itself. His role as one of the organization's leading teachers meant that his explanations received significant attention. Whether people agreed with the revised understanding or questioned it, many recognized that David Splane had become one of the primary voices explaining important doctrinal changes within Jehovah's Witnesses. The overlapping generation explanation brought him even greater public recognition. It also increased discussion about his role within the organization and the teachings he presented. His careful method of explaining doctrine became familiar to audiences both inside and outside the religion. However, this would not be the last time his public comments attracted worldwide attention. Years later, another statement made by David Splane would once again spark widespread discussion about expectations for the future. The conversation extended far beyond the walls of kingdom halls and reached audiences around the world. The explanation of the overlapping generation had already made David Splane one of the most recognizable teachers among Jehovah's Witnesses. Yet it marked only one chapter in his growing public role, as later comments would continue to draw attention and become the subject of discussion on a worldwide scale. Public messages and growing global attention. In the year 2020, during a JW Broadcasting update, David Splane described the period the world was living in as the final part of the last days, and he stressed it as undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days. This expression strongly reinforced a belief that many Jehovah's Witnesses already held. For many members, it confirmed the idea that the present system of things was very close to its end. The message was seen as a reminder to remain spiritually focused, alert, and steady in faith during what was understood as a critical time. Outside the organization, the reaction was very different. Critics responded by saying that this kind of language increased expectations that had already been present for many years. They argued that such expressions had been used across generations, and that repeating them in stronger terms added pressure on believers who were already waiting for events they believed could happen at any time. Former members also joined the discussion, debating what the phrase truly meant and whether it created additional emotional or mental pressure for people who were expecting the end to come soon. In the following year, 2021, David Splane became the center of another widely discussed talk during the regional convention. In this address, he focused on the subject of apostasy and the importance of protecting personal faith. He used the illustration of poison to explain his point, stating that dangerous ideas should be recognized early and avoided before they could cause harm. He encouraged members to avoid consuming material created by individuals who oppose the organization, presenting it as a way of safeguarding spiritual health. Supporters believed the message reflected biblical warnings about false teachers and encouraged members to remain firm in their faith. Critics argued it discouraged independent thinking and limited exposure to opposing views, fueling widespread debate across online platforms, news outlets, and former member communities. While these digital debates were taking place, another development was already growing in importance. It involved increased attention from television media, investigative journalists, and public institutions, which meant that questions about the organization were becoming more visible and harder to avoid. For many years, the main audience for David Splane's talks had been Jehovah's Witnesses themselves. His presentations were designed to encourage members, explain doctrinal points, and strengthen confidence in the organization's beliefs and structure. However, by the middle of the 2010s, the audience had become much wider. Journalists, researchers, government officials, and former members had begun paying closer attention to his talks and public statements. This shift meant that his words were no longer heard only within the organization, but were also being analyzed in broader public discussions. A clear example of this change took place in November of the year 2015. David Splane traveled to Portugal to speak to nearly 50,000 Jehovah's Witnesses at a special gathering. Only a few weeks before this event, a Portuguese television network had broadcast an investigative documentary. This program examined allegations of child abuse and the way such cases were handled within the organization. The timing of these events brought additional attention to his visit. Although David Splane did not mention the television program directly during his talk, he referred to media reports that, in his view, presented only one side of the story. According to independent reporting, he suggested that some journalists approached the subject with closed minds and that they did not consider all perspectives. He also indicated that the organization often chose not to extend public disputes, believing that such attention would eventually fade over time. Supporters viewed the remarks as a reminder to avoid drawing conclusions from incomplete information and to approach media reports with caution. Critics, however, believed they reflected a reluctance to address difficult questions openly. Meanwhile, the situation in Portugal was part of a broader global issue. Earlier, the Australian Royal Commission had brought international attention to how many organizations, including Jehovah's Witnesses, responded to child sexual abuse allegations, making its findings a key reference in public discussions. Although David Splane did not personally testify before the commission, its findings continued to influence conversations about the organization's policies long after the hearings had ended. Governments, legal systems, and media organizations across different countries began paying closer attention to how such cases were managed and reported. As time went on, investigative journalists continued to examine these issues, and legal institutions in different countries also became involved in reviewing policies and responses. This increased level of attention meant that organizational leaders faced growing public scrutiny. Questions that had once been discussed mainly within religious or internal contexts were now being addressed in public forums, courtrooms, and official inquiries. At the same time, David Splane's role also became more visible on the international stage. He was no longer seen only as someone who explained Bible prophecy or provided internal instruction. Instead, he had become one of the public representatives of an organization that was increasingly discussed in legal, political, and media environments around the world. One of the most closely followed developments in this wider context came from Norway. What do you think about the Jehovah Witnesses? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before you go, be sure to click on the video shown on your screen.